Okay, so I'm a huge nerd, and one thing I've always had a problem with is how water powers are used in fantasy and anime. And one thing I have the biggest issue with is they're not used very well, and they don't make no fucking sense. And there's a lot of series that have a good example of how water powers are used, but in every one of those series, there's also really, really dumb examples and how you wouldn't actually want to use it that way. And by the end of this, you're probably going to see that none of these characters actually know how to fight. I think Avatar The Last Airbender is the gold standard for elemental-based powers. It's a very specific kind of way to use it where it's very realistic and there has to be that thing there to be able to use it. So if you want to use water, you can't be in a desert, that kind of thing. Where other series, you can make your own water. So what I'm kind of thinking about is a kind of power or magic system that is in between Avatar and maybe like Naruto or Black Clover, where you actually can make your own water, but then it still acts like water. And that's really important because if it's something where it's just magic water that can do it at once, then this whole thing kind of is irrelevant. And then Black Clover does this a little bit where Black Clover is cool because it has a lot of different elements that interact in different ways and do different things. But in some ways, it's just fancier magic Dragon Ball Z. And the fact that I have water and you have fire sometimes doesn't matter. So these are the shows that I would consider good examples of water or ice power. Same thing. I'm going to count them both in the same deal. I'm not counting water and ice power separately. And Bleach has really good examples of ice power specifically. Obviously, Avatar: Last Airbender is the gold standard. Naruto has really, really good examples of water abilities, actually. It also has some really dumb examples. Black Clover, I mentioned, is a fun way to use water powers, but like I don't think it's actually a good way to use them. Zatch Bell, if anybody, all three people have seen that show, is a good example. Shaolin Showdown, Magi, Dragon Prince, and Frieren even has some like elemental type magic. And these are all shows that are really good. They give good examples. But let's talk about the actual problems that I have with water powers in shows and why they make me so annoyed and they bother me so much. Right off the bat, 90% of the ways that somebody uses water powers in shows just wouldn't work in a fight type situation. Right? They just wouldn't work. One of them is shooting a big water cannon at somebody. Okay, it just wouldn't work. That's kind of lame. And I'm going to go on the reasons why in a second. Making any kind of armor or out of water also doesn't make sense. So usually there's a lot of freezing and ice powers in elemental type shows too, but usually how they do it is they just make a weapon out of ice or make an icicle and throw it at somebody. Also a really dumb way to use that. Another way is sort of similar to the water cannon type situation, but just creating an overwhelming amount of water, which would work, but there's problems with that too. And this is the biggest problem with it. Pound for pound, if I have a water power and I'm throwing water at you, water doesn't inherently hurt you, right? So if you have anything else, if you're throwing fire at me, if you're throwing rocks at me, if you're doing anything else, that stuff, imagine it's the same weight, is gonna hurt me more than my water by itself will hurt you. So if we're talking like more of an Avatar: The Last Airbender type situation, if I'm throwing water at you, it has to move faster, or I have to like compress it or something, or I have to freeze it, turn it into an icicle, or I'm gonna have to make it harder in some sort of way. And if we have a magic battery type situation, if you did that same thing with fire or stone or, however the element system works, all those, or lightning, all those things are way more dangerous to get hit with than water. And so, again, whether it's like you're looking at a weight or you're looking at it as like a magic battery, if we use the same amount of magic battery and you have fire and I have water, you're just gonna win. So why would anybody use water abilities like in that way? And that goes for making ice weapons, or if you're just trying to create like a tidal wave over somebody, you know, and it wouldn't work. Now, here are the top kind of like 10 ways I think that water powers would actually work and be actually way more effective than all of the other elements. I think that if a series used it really smart and it was like a tactical kind of series, and it was kind of rock, paper, scissors games and fights where the powers I have matter and the powers you have matter, kind of like JoJo. These are a place where water powers would actually be better than literally everything else. And the first one I have, and is actually an example used in Naruto, is making a mist or a smoke screen with water, or fog with water. And you can do this one or two ways. And this is like more of a tactical type thing, so the character would have to be good at other things in whatever magic world they're in. But for a a fog, you're either going to use it to get closer to your opponent, like your opponent has long range stuff, and you're going to use that to run up on them. Or you have long range weapons and you're going to make a fog to pull away from your opponent and get away from them so you can attack them. So you're going to use this to like control the battlefield and move back and forth and not get hit by stuff. And so now, practically speaking, if someone's charging up a big Kamehameha wave and I just fog the battlefield, now your big attack that I wouldn't be able to block normally is meaningless because you can't hit me with it now, right? So I think this is like a major advantage that, for a good example of this in Naruto, actually, Zabuza uses it really well, but he should be using it more defensively. So a good example is if a character has a Rasengan or Chidori or even Inoki's particle style, they're charged up this big attack and you can't match that force. Oh, I don't have to. I'm just going to put my fog up and I'm going to move out of the way. Like, why would I try to block your giant attack when I could just use a little bit of energy and make a fog? So I think this is like really the number one power just for versatility and how little effort it would take to use. So this second way to use water powers is actually my favorite way, and I thought of it today, and this is the whole reason I made this video. But in Avatar, they use kind of a water whip or water arm situation a lot, especially in the second series, Legend of Korra, where they put water all in their arms and they just like kind of whip people with them. And I think this is the best use of water in basically any situation. But you have to do it in kind of a specific way. The way I thought of it is whatever magic world you want, however the powers work. And Zabuza is another good example of this. Say you were a swordsman and that was kind of like your bread and butter. But now you can actually put range on this weapon. And what I would do is have a sword at the end of the water whip where it's almost like a mace or a flail, except it's a giant sword, kind of like Zabuza's sword. And now I don't have to rely on the water of freezing it to hurt you or making it faster or more dense to hurt you. It could still be water, except now I have this giant whip with a giant sword on the end of it, so it's sort of like not quite a total long-range attack. But if I have it, in conjunction with other things like my mist power, if we're just sword fighting, all of a sudden the mist shows up and you're not going to expect this sword to come out of nowhere at a weird angle and a whip and come and hit you. This is actually my favorite idea for a superpower, and I couldn't quite think of a perfect example in fiction where somebody uses it besides the Avatar series. And I think this is really the best way to use water powers. You're going to use less energy than the other person if they're just shooting fireballs at you or throwing giant rocks at you. You're going to use less energy. You don't need that much water, right? You need like really 50 gallons of water. You're not going to lose the water after you start using it because it's connected to your body, used as a whip. You're not making icicles and throwing it at the person. So if you're in a world where proximity to the element you're controlling is an issue, that's all no longer an issue. And my other reason why I really like this power is if you get in a bind, someone is pressing you, you need to get away, you can all of a sudden, that same water you're using as a whip, with the sword on the end of it, you can now turn into a mist and now get away from the other person.